Today, we are talking with a pretty well-known PMEA member about what she had to do in her district to advocate for her music program once she announced she was retiring. This is some real news you can use with some takeaway tips. So get your notepad ready to take some notes on this edition of Take Note. Well, hello, everybody. As I said, we are talking about advocating for your music program today with a real life, real world example. And we're going to talk about what that is in just a minute with today's guest. I'm sure you recognize her, PMEA's past president, Tina Bennett. In the last year and a half of the pandemic, you've seen her on a lot of PMEA videos. You've seen her at PMEA conferences in person before that. But the headline in Tina's life, I think, is recently retired as of just a couple months ago now from the Clarion Limestone School District. So Tina, first of all, welcome and congratulations on retirement.
Thank you, Mark. It was interesting to say the least. Not what I had planned. I can tell you that, that's for sure.
So by that, you mean retiring in a pandemic, I'm guessing.
Right? Who does that?
Who does that? Tell us about that. Yeah,
exactly. So, just a little backstory. I've been at Clarion Limestone my whole career, which is something that's kind of unusual in itself. Not many people spend their whole career at one district these days. Things are more transient. But during that time, I took on many roles. I made it my home. I bought into it and I made it my home, which meant I was involved in dance team. I was the, advisor for the junior class and did the proms. I did graduations. I did the retirement parties. I did all of that stuff. So when I knew in my plan that when I hit 60, yes, I'm 60, I'm telling you my age. When I hit 60, I was going to be retiring after that year, because my district, our contract pays for 5 years of insurance. As a lot of us plan that because we work for insurance kind of after a while. So I've been telling people, look, I'm not going to be here. I'm not going to be here. So I kind of tried to set things up so that I could go and leave the family that I loved so dearly and the programs that I put my heart and soul into on solid ground, because I didn't want to leave and just shut the door and walk away and say, hey, good luck with everything. That's just not me. And I don't think many of us as music educators and educators don't want that to happen. We want the thriving to continue. So I'm getting ready, I'm looking at 1 year left, etc. Well, actually 2 years left. And then whammo, we have a pandemic. And I have to relearn how to teach, number one, via, Zoom calls and all the technology, which I started teaching before the internet existed. So, that was a fun thing. And I mean, thank God I had younger teachers who were patient with me. I mean, I cried more my last 2 years of teaching, and it wasn't about leaving. It was about, I can teach. I know my content. I'm a good teacher. I can't do this technology stuff. So the curve was insane. But we made it through that. And here we go. We're getting to the end. We're coming back, things like that. But we're not performing. That whole dream of, oh, I've got this concert and I'm going to do every song that I've always loved and I'm going to put it all together. It's going to be a grand finale and walk out. Nope, that's not happening either. I went back basically to the basics, the beginning, when I started the smaller programs, the smaller concerts, and I had a program for each separate group. So my 7th grade choir had their own concert and their parents got to see them. My 8th grade choir, etc., all the way through, which made my last month of teaching, I had 9 concerts in order to give everybody their moment. It was exhausting. Everyone's like, oh, how's retirement? Are you just phoning it in? No, we're not doing that, because you were crazy busy, plus graduation, plus the prom, which had to be all redone differently, social distance, masking, blah, blah, blah. So I was on a treadmill for, all that time getting it done, all the while saying, remember, I'm not going to be here next year. What got lost in the shuffle was, are they going to rehire? Are they going to hire? And I finally literally sent my superintendent an email and said, are they going to hire my position? Before that time, before I even turned in my letter to the board, my wonderful guidance counselor, who I get along with, spilled the beans that I was going to be, thinking of retired. My letter wasn't even to the board yet. And he's doing the scheduling. And he said, oh, full disclosure, Mrs. Bennett's not going to be here next year. What? And the children then hesitated to sign up for the ensembles and the classes. So there goes the numbers for next year. So by the time I send the letter to, or the email to my superintendent, they're doing the numbers game. Full disclosure, I love my district. They've supported me along the way. They did the numbers. They did the calculations, which is what they will do. That's what's going to happen. So please be aware that they're doing what they do because that's how they're taught. They don't get the emotion. They don't get all of that stuff. They just see the numbers. Well, these numbers are this. We can obviously consolidate this into, one position. So all of a sudden, in the middle of all these 9 performances and graduation and all this stuff, here comes the fact that no, they're not going to rehire my position. It was bananas. And, what do I do now? Here I am trying to finish out my year and do the best I can for these children. And what now? They're going to consolidate this position, which they tried once before and did for a small moment where I had to be one of 2 teachers in my district and running back and forth. And it was crazy. How do you go about fixing this problem? Which again, because of it was like this perfect storm, because the guidance counselor was doing his job, he thought, to be honest with these kids, which I told him it wasn't his news to tell. But anyway, and he really apologized. And in retrospect, he was like, I am so sorry. That's not my intention, all of that stuff. We had just developed and got approved 3 more classes and courses to teach. But in the numbers, everything went down. So how do you go about, what next? Well, for me, I'm like, all right, I'm going to throw it out on social media to my followings of my alumni, because I've been there long enough, 37 years, that I'm teaching the kids of kids I taught. And so what are they going to do? Fire me? So I throw it out on social media. Hey, just so you know, they're not going to rehire. My association picked up on it and threw it out to everybody. I threw it out to my colleagues and things like that. And letters of support and emails started coming in. Who can I email? Well, here's the list. And so the funny thing is they emailed the board, who literally was unaware. And the board got annihilated with all of these emails and things like this. And then they're saying to me, what? We didn't even discuss this yet. And here it was my administration, again, doing a numbers game. I'm not throwing them under the bus. They're like, you're irreplaceable. All this. I said, number one, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard in my life. To tell me I'm irreplaceable and not replace me, that is not an honor or a gift.
Right.
It's just not. So, and I'm not throwing them under the bus. So finally, we shifted and I said, no, you need to send it to the administration, not the board, because the board got fried. Now, one thing I can say, my colleagues in the higher ed world and my retired friends and things like that wrote phenomenal letters, CC'd me on them, and just members support with, statistics and all of these things and things that passionate letters that they sent. I cried and cried. The things they were saying were so wonderful. But here's what really put the big turn. I went to the board meeting the month of May that was going to be the deciding factor whether or not they were going to, yes or no, rehire. My students started asking me, what can we do? We don't want to lose this, because they were worried about who's next. And I told the kids, I started out as a brand new, right out of college person, and I worked my way up through all of it and this was my home and got to where I was, the grandma of the place. A new person will do that. let them try, and you're going to connect with them. Remember the student teachers that you loved and the people like that. That's what we're looking for. That's what you'll probably get. And so then the kids were excited because they needed to be excited. I said, I never told them what to say. I said, all I gave them 2 points of advice. Number one, be prepared to have maybe a 2-minute window. So be well written, write it down and be respectful. But say what you want to say. It's your call. Well, can we say this? All I want you to do is be respectful and be ready to go. So I walk into the board meeting and I go to clear back. I don't want to be involved in this. I just want it's not my fight technically. And so, my colleagues got the band kids involved, everybody. So they opened it up immediately because there was a pretty full room. And I didn't notice at first how many people there were for what reasons, because our board meetings have been a little bit dicey lately because there's a lot of changes going on. 35 children and a few parents were sitting together ready to go. The kids were dressed in dresses and ties and polo shirts. I was dying. And they got up one at a time. They said their name and they told their grade and what groups they were involved in. And they began to then read. They gave them 2 minutes each. It took 1 hour and 35 minutes of those children and parents coming in and coming in and coming in. And finally, when everyone was done, I stood up and I said, I came here, I developed these programs. I taught you several board members. My principal was in my show choir, and all this stuff. And I've taught your children, and they deserve what you had. And if you reduce this down to, we can't give only what we can give. And, again, I cried for 1.5 hours of all the things that, I'm so proud. And I said, and these children did this themselves and had the courage to stand up in front of a scary audience. And they did it, and they were well spoken. They were quoting Plato and all this stuff. It was unbelievable. And that's when the tide started to turn. And then the alumni from across the globe practically were emailing constantly and everything. And board members were coming up to me and they're like, we are not cutting this position. I give you my word. And I'm like, well, that's on you and I'll believe it when I see it, because at this point I was just like stressed out to the max. But I am happy to say that I just got word that I think tonight is the night that they will be hiring someone for my position. And I am beyond thrilled, but the fight literally went to the kids, the parents, and the families. And yeah, so that's kind of the story and how it went.
So let me editorialize slightly and go back to a point that you were making when, this is not, when we do this advocacy type stuff, it isn't an us versus them. You make this really good point that your administration is looking at numbers, and it's not that they, as an administrator, are heartless, but no. They are in a I would never want to be a school superintendent. I just think that is one of the hardest jobs in the world, because no matter what you do, it's wrong to someone. So you should be making data-driven decisions, of course, but it's taking in all the data. Data is not just numbers on a page, right? So they're in a position where they're looking at the numbers, and they are in a pandemic. And they don't know, and this is just one of my biggest pet peeves, a school district is required to, in Pennsylvania, is required to have their budget set by June 30th, which actually means it needs to be set weeks before that. You're talking, this is in May, but they don't actually have a full grasp of how much money they're going to receive from the state, which makes up, depending on the district, 35-40% of the budget they're receiving, which is not the majority, but it is a huge chunk. So they are making decisions without that piece of clarity. And that just drives me crazy. And I'm not even the one that has to do that. So they're in a very difficult spot.
Yes.
So I just want to make that point so people understand it is not always an administrator or superintendent saying we don't like a program. They're just looking at facts.
Right.
Second point to what you did. So the emotional piece is important. So we always say when we go to advocate, so you have been with us how many times in Washington, D.C. and in Harrisburg, right, advocating. And what do? The first thing we do is we say, here are the facts, here are the numbers, here's the request. But then what is it always followed up with? It's always followed up with the story of why it's important. So you did that, but these students coming and saying, okay, but wait a second, we need to remember the importance of this to our school and to our community, because as you said, look how many people here were part of this program. Right. So I think what you've done is this perfect textbook example of advocating for a program. Now, you were at a different kind of stage to do that. This might have been harder if for you, 15 years ago, if this is happening while you're not ready to turn your keys in and retire.
Right.
For sure.
It actually did happen. My colleague ended up with an eye disease. It was a hereditary thing where he was literally going blind. And he said to me, I'm done tomorrow. They're taking my driver's license. And I was like, what? I had no idea. And I had to conduct the Christmas concert, all of this stuff. And so we tried with subs, that didn't work. And then the numbers game came in and they said, you two have to work out your schedule. However you do it, we'll support it. And again, we were very busy at the time. My father-in-law was actually struggling with cancer, and he died the third day of school. Here, contractually, I ended up working an additional 30 minutes in the elementary over my contractual day. But because by the time I got back from the funeral and all that stuff, and we looked at it, we couldn't grieve it because it was past the grieving time. And so I literally had to teach for over a year with that extra. And that we finally brought to the board at the end of the year, and we said, this is ridiculous. This should not be happening. I should be compensated, all of this stuff. So when I brought that back to light, and again, when it was happening, you're so busy. We're always, we're just so busy doing our jobs that sometimes taking the time to do the advocacy and look at things, and we do so much for free as it is. You do need to do that. You do need to find that balance, because we are paid professionals. We are professionals. We're good at what we do. And there's a value in that, even in the logistics of a graduation and how to move the people around, and how to set up the stages and all these things that we help out with. There's a value to that. And you have to find that balance between what you're comfortable volunteering and what you're not comfortable volunteering. And that blending of all of that gives you that give and take. So for me, yes, I volunteered a lot. I did get paid a few supplementals, but my administration, I never wanted to be adversarial with them. And I've had crappy ones. I've had horrible ones who treated me terribly. But at the end of the day, I could lay my head on the pillow and say, I did the best I could for those children. My philosophy has never been, I worked for this district. I didn't work for those administrators. I didn't even work for those parents. They pay my salaries, yes, but I worked for those children. And the children were my first priority 100% of the time. Did I make millions? I did not. Did I live comfortably? I was fine. I made it do. But at the end of the day, I did it for those children because I'm an educator. We're educators. We care about those kids. And if we could get that mindset change, yes, you still advocate for a good pay, all this stuff, things like that. But you have to have a good working relationship with not only the children, but your administration and things like that. And I think because I've kept that, even when we disagreed, I have literally gone to their offices and told them that their thinking is ridiculous. This is the dumbest thing I've ever heard. And here's the reason why, and screamed and slammed the door and walked out. But at the end of the day, you're still, because I'm passionate. We know that I'm passionate about these things. And at the end of the day, I never disrespected them. I never, my principal was my student. I had stories, trust me, that I could have thrown him under the bus. I never did that when he became my principal. I never did that. I kept those childhood shenanigans where they needed to be. You have to respect the human beings that are the decision makers, because we're not walking in their shoes. We're walking in ours. And I want what I want. but because for the kids. But you still need to watch those relationships and really take care of them, because at the end of the day, you never know who's making those decisions that are going to affect your situation.
And that's kind of a good piece of takeaway advocacy advice, which is part of my next question. So you say you've taught for 37 years, you say you're 60 years old. We're going to get the fact checkers on both of those things, because I don't know, I don't believe either of them. But let's go with them. Let's say that's accurate. So okay, I would say have been a constant advocate. Now, you just talked about some examples of here's where I was faced with a challenge and had to be an advocate, but that's not all that advocacy is. Advocacy is just being positive in general and promoting what you're doing. So I'm curious if you have some takeaway advice for folks about who are beginning their career, who are mid-career, as far as, how are you then constantly just advocating in some way, maybe promoting is the better word, music education in your school and in your community, because you've done that.
Yeah. First of all, be greedy. You want every child in your room somehow, some way. And even if you're a study hall teacher, and you got a child there that you don't know, get to know them. There's an opening right there. Here's a kid, talk to them every day, see how they are. Sometimes kids don't come into our programs because they're afraid of us, because we're kind of big and a lot at times, because we have large quantities of kids. Get one-on-one with these kids, be greedy. Every child in that building, because music education we know is good for everyone. We got to find different niches. So, let's create a ukulele class or a keyboard class or a modern band class or anything you can think of. So if I have a child who's sitting over there doing nothing or looking lonely, I'm going to figure out what's going on. I'm going to put a ukulele in the hand, put on Little Kids Rock so they can put the headphones on and start learning to play something, or teaching them stuff about stage crew. If they're a hands-on kid, let's do something like that. But be greedy. You want every child, and then you're establishing these relationships. I was the annoying teacher that said hello to every child I passed in the hallway, every single one, even if I didn't know them. I would say good morning, because our paths are usually similar, our schedules. So you're seeing the same kids. Why am I walking past this child and not saying hello? I'm establishing relationship. So even I just had a child email me a week ago. He had heard I was retiring. He never had me pass 7th grade required classes. He said, you were the only teacher that ever believed that I could, and I'm getting married and I have a family and I'm established and I made it, and I wanted you to know. So they're not all going to be in your classroom, but now he's going to support his child. And moving forward, maybe his child has a propensity for, music or whatever. And he's going to say, what, music's not so bad. I literally, if I needed something built, go into the shops and talk to the guys, and things like that. So it's a relationship thing. You have to be open to not everyone's a music person, but everyone loves music. I just don't think if they don't, well, we need to meet. But anyway, and so it's the relationship in your global relationship in your school, with your coaches and all of that, being reasonable, even when they're not. Even when others are not, you need to be reasonable and take it from their perspective, they're not seeing it yet, but maybe they will. And it's your job to educate them that there's a whole big world out there. So definitely be greedy, with the kids. You want to be involved. You want to be the one that they know. They know every teacher, they know you. Even if you're that annoying one that says hello to them in the hall, you know what? They like it. They won't say so, but 14-year-old boys and all their, boyness, they still be like, hi, hey, nice shoes, they're going to grin. And it might be the only time someone said something positive to them all day. So, be that person. And number 2, the adults in your building, if they need help, the other teachers, maybe you step up and help every now and then, because then you establish that relationship as well. Your administrators, if they need something, I volunteer to help, because number 1, they don't do logistics. Many administrators just don't know how to, they have ideas. I'm like, no, it's not going to work. And here's why. And then they come to you and they're asking you, so that when you do have an ask later on, there's a relationship you've established. As you know, when we go and you know some of the people on, Capitol Hill, or you know them in Harrisburg, and you establish a relationship with their secretaries, etc., it makes it easier to at least talk or get a place at the table. And so those would be my big advice. It's just, it's the relationships that then, you're not always going to get things to go your way. It just isn't going to happen. But, and that's not a personal thing. That's not against you. If they just can't make it happen, it's not personal. Don't take it personal. Find another way. Find another way. You just got to get creative. Okay. All right. Well, you tried that. It failed. It didn't work. You didn't get what you wanted today, but maybe you'll get it down the road. Park it over here. Think about it for a while and come up with something else. Find another way. Be greedy.
I see at the next in-person conference a PCMEA meeting with Tina Bennett in the front of the room, charging everybody up with that stuff. But what you're saying is of course valuable to anyone in a music teacher role, but it's a life lessons in there too, because it's so much about relationship building, and a failure is not a failure. It's a lesson learned, and
right.
And then, okay, well, that didn't work. So do I have to go around the problem, or whatever? So yeah, good, the really good takeaways there. So all right, so I appreciate you sharing this story. I appreciate you talking takeaways. My last question is, so now what? You're retired. What are you going to do with yourself now?
Oh gosh. Well, I'm probably gonna keep on carrying the banner, somehow, some way. I'm hoping to be available to people who might need the wisdom of somebody who's done all this stuff. And, maybe do some collaboration with some people. Now that I have the free time, I've always wanted to, but I've never had the free time to do it because I was always so busy with my own program. So I can't yet walk away from music education. So I want to be a supportive role and, available to help in any way I can. I do have grandchildren, and of course they want to see me. So I'll probably be available to them too. I'm a seamstress. I've got a sewing machine right there. So I do love to sew and things like that. But no, I really, honestly, it's funny because most of the pandemic frustrated and irritated people, and it did me too. But once I got my teeth into it, it sort of fired me up again. And so now I've got this huge head of steam because I was able to create new programs, the Happy Birthday Project, where all my students recorded individual singing and messages to residents in nursing homes. And please feel free to steal that. Anybody can take it. The kids just recorded a 60-second video, each child from 8th through 12th grade. And we assigned them a resident in a nursing home, and they would play the video. You just send it digitally. It was a piece of cake. And the kids loved it. Hi, I'm so-and-so from Clarion Limestone High School. I hear it's your birthday today. And they would talk about themselves a little bit. My grandma, it was beautiful. And so I'd like that to continue across the country, whatever, steal it. But, it got me fired up. And so I want to be available if someone needs direction and guidance and they're losing programs or whatever, I would love to help, because having done through it, or even just write letters for them, to their administration, which is something that I think we as PMEA and NAFME should have available and ready for our members who need just some, a beefy support with our PMEA, clout and NAFME's clout. And I've spoken a little bit to Scott Sheehan about that as well, and said, I'd like to see something like that, just even a form letter that we can just dump in and send to administrators. I think would be a great idea too. But yeah, so that's kind of what, I don't know.
Oh no, I know. I'm sure you're going to keep finding projects. We've talked several PMEA ideas you have that I'm sure you'll be a part of. Still part of the PMEA executive committee. You're not going anywhere. No. You're gonna keep busy, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But I hope you take some time to rest and relax in that as well.
I don't know. I like being energized.
Well, okay. All right. I know you've traveled a few times already, which is great.
I'll rest when I'm gone,
What a wonderful attitude. And it's great to have this chance to catch up and chat. And hear about your situation and the positive outcome of the advocacy work that you've done. So thank you for taking the time, Tina. And I want you to go and work on your next project. I'd say relax, but I know you won't. You're going to go and work on a project.
Not going to happen.
Thanks for talking with us today.
Thank you.
And to all of you, thank you for joining us. And we'll see you next time. And we want to thank our sponsor, our presenting sponsor, the Slippery Rock University Music Department. We'll see you next time.